Give me a second, sorry.
Don't worry.
Here. Okay, let's see. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Present. Or I guess we could just do this, right? Can you guys still
Yeah,
see
I
that
think that
fully?
works.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, today we're talking about the business model canvas, and basically we're going to go through some of the key performance indicators as well as different business models to sort of understand fully like how a business works and how we're going to apply this into a business model canvas, which is going to be used within the CVC competition in order to judge sort of like the business aspects of the startup. So going to go straight into it. Um, some KPIs that I feel like we should all be aware of or know about are sort of metrics. What this means is that these are metrics that measure the success of your project or startup. So, for example, some of the key things that we look at if you were a social media startup, for example, would be like the number of users, how many times they would go on the app each day, how long each time they would be on the app for, things like that, how many downloads you have. All of these are key performance indicators. They don't necessarily have to be like economic or financial data in any sense. They can also be data about the users, about the retention rate, about how often users churn, which means how often they would like delete the app after downloading that. So any sort of data that's related to your customer base is sort of really classified under a key performance indicator. Obviously, you still have those financial indicators, which can also be very useful, such as how much money you're spending, your burn rate, as well as other sort of like factors like your valuation, which is also another indicator. But in at the stage of startups, a lot of people are using more of the user and customer base indicators because those are actually more telling than compared to how much cash you have, because a lot of times startups are working in the negative numbers. So yeah, a lot of key performance indicators are more so on the user and how much time they're spending on the app, or like the user and customer base metrics. So I'm going to be introducing two different business models to you guys. First being the B2B and the second being the B2C. Does anyone know what the B2B versus B2C stand for? Okay, if not, I'll just jump in and go ahead. So B2B means business to business, and B2C means business to customer. And basically, the title of it is pretty much self-explanatory. So for the first one, B2B is a transaction between two businesses. And basically, sort of, if you look at the companies on the right-hand side, a lot of these a lot of these are service providers, which provide like tools that other businesses can use. For example, Amazon has Amazon Web Services, which hosts a lot of like cloud data that a lot of businesses subscribe to in order to get access to. Apple, for example, often sells their MacBooks or their computers or desktops to like businesses in order for them to be used in the workplace. FedEx is another one. They help with shipping from businesses to businesses, or they are used within the business's supply chain in order to make it more efficient. Also, Google, Google is used in order to they have a lot of like different services that allow sort of businesses to become more efficient and operate in a more streamlined manner. So a lot of these are like very much like catering to other businesses to make their lives easier. And yeah, so if you have questions about this, like feel free to speak up during the presentation, or as well, you can wait to the end. So if there's no questions about B2B, B2C is a little bit more easy to understand. Basically, it is a transaction between the business and the consumer itself. So a lot of this means that there are companies out there that are targeting consumers, such as the companies on the left, which I'm sure you guys are all aware of: Starbucks, Nike, Airbnb, Lyft, McDonald's. All of these sell like products or services to customers. And they all have like slightly different business models, which we're going to go through later on. But essentially, all of these have in common is that they're marketing directly to the consumer itself, not through a secondary channel, unlike the other sort of service providers in the B2B sector. B2C is directly to the consumer, which can be advantageous as well as disadvantageous depending on how you see it. But that's essentially what B2C means. And then one of the so we're going to talk through a couple examples of direct to consumer brands and how why some of these brands have been unable to be as successful as what we once thought they were. So back in like 2018 or 2020, a lot of the times VC investors looked at D2C as something that was the future of sort of commerce and shopping in a way. For example, Casper, Glossier, Allbirds, Away, all of these brands had like really huge valuations because people thought that they were going to take off in the long run. But they basically what they did was that they shipped products to the end user themselves. So instead of shipping to department stores and then having the department stores sell to consumers, they directly cut out the middleman by shipping directly to consumers. What this meant was that they had to spend a lot of money on direct advertising to those consumers through social media marketing, for example, or search engine optimization, also known as SEO. What this means is that they were able to target them because they were at the time the marketing costs were pretty low if you wanted to like advertise on social media. Unfortunately, since then the marketing costs have increased a lot, and now it takes like a lot of money in order to advertise to a consumer directly through social media, which means that for a lot of these businesses, they were unable to keep up with that rising cost because their customer acquisition cost, which is another KPI, it's the cost of acquiring a customer, increased a lot. And therefore, they were unable to target consumers as effectively. And as a result, a lot of them now are shifting more towards the traditional model of going through department stores. Like, for example, Casper has a store in New York and they're selling sort of mattresses in a way where you can like go into the store and try them out, because a lot of the times you do actually have to try the product before you want to buy them. And they realize that you can't just rely on marketing through social media in order to get customers. So that's the long story short about why a lot of these brands who we thought once were going to be like really big actually didn't make it at the end of the day because they were unable to sort of effectively market to consumers and get them to buy their products. So yeah, this is a little graphic that shows sort of the way in which sort of a direct-to-consumer brand is built. So in the business model, you have direct sales channels, you have the supply chains, as well as technology to increase efficiency and customer focus. A lot of the times, like, the brand is also built around a cult following. Sort of through social media advertising, they're able to sort of create this following. And their go-to-market strategy is sort of driven by all the insights drawn from beta testing and second-party data partnerships. So what this means is that obviously they have to do a lot of market research in order to make sure that the product that they're building is going to work in the market and that you can actually effectively target people through social media in order to get them to purchase. And that's also another sort of like KPI that they're looking for, how much money or how much time you're spending on like the websites, how much like hesitation you're having before you actually click purchase, or how long the journey is from you to first see the product until you actually go purchase it. That's also another important KPI in terms of like direct to consumer specifically. And yeah, so direct to consumer is usually digitally native and social media first, which means that they are all virtual online and they usually don't have a store presence. And it's not until they grow to a certain stage where they're able to actually expand their presence into physical stores. And yeah, so basically they put consumers first because they always want to make sure that their service is valued. What this means is that they're usually have like very responsive customer service. And because they're not like selling through department stores, they can usually have better service because of that, and they can like solve issues as they go, instead of having to negotiate with the supplier, and basically having 3 people in the transaction makes things slower, and having 2 people in the transaction makes things faster. So it's like pretty straightforward. And in terms of B2B, there also can be sort of a different dynamic in which there is a managed marketplace. So what this means is that a business wants to buy something, but they don't have easy access to it. So it could be the price is very high, or that there's just a limited number of supply. And then on the other hand, there's a seller who wants to offer this product, but doesn't have a convenient method to sell it or access it to the right customer. So either they sort of have a very sort of stagnant or siloed supply chain. All of these factors can mean that buyers and sellers have some sort of misalignment in terms of how they want to sell or buy the product. Um, what makes these sort of marketplaces successful? It's essentially what they do is that they can match people who want to buy with people who want to sell, and sort of like make those transactions happen, and thus increase the average order value of each of the customer transactions. So because they have like a lot of fragmentation between the buyers and sellers, they're able to mix and match them according to the website's like algorithm or matching feature, which allows them to sort of match people who want to buy at a certain price and people who want to sell at a certain price to make sure that people are satisfied with their products or services. So what this means is that they keep sort of like transaction money is kept on the platform, and that so that when when you buy a product, you can like check the validity of it, make sure that it's like actually what you want and that it's not like a false sort of claim. And then once the things have been verified, they can then switch the money. Um, and what this means is that you're able to sort of have a very large market because you're targeting both buyers and sellers. But on the other hand, it's also hard to reach sort of a tipping point where you can actually like grow really quickly, because you have to onboard all of these customers first, which could be another barrier as well, on the flip side of the advantage, as well as potentially increasing the market through efficiency. So if you're able to increase or like decrease the friction, and get more traction in the market, that could also be something that sort of spearheads the growth of the marketplace. Okay, so we're not going to do this, but we can come back to it if we have time. So I want to talk a little bit more about the revenue models for different startups, and like how these are, or like the pros and cons of each of these, and like if you're thinking about starting a startup, what things you should consider in developing these. So the first model is sort of on demand. And basically it's a lot of these things you've seen before: Uber, Airbnb, Instacart, where when a consumer demands it, it's fulfilled, and that's when you pay for it. So usually Uber has it where you pay after the ride. Airbnb pays it upfront before you go before you go to the vacation. Instacart also, you pay instantaneously and it's delivered on demand. Pretty straightforward. The second revenue model is sort of a freemium model where users are allowed to get the basic products for free, or basic services. But if you want to sort of get access to the better features, the premium features, you can pay for it. For example, Spotify has the freemium feature where you can listen to music, but you get ads, and you can pay to get rid of the ads. Zoom also the same thing, sort of like you can get free Zoom meetings for around like 30 minutes. But if you want to get longer minutes, have longer meetings or have more people in the meetings, you have to pay for the plan to get the better feature. So the next one's very interesting. It's like hidden revenue streams. And these are more used in like social media sources like Google and Facebook, where users don't actually have to pay for the services offered. So kind of like the freemium model. But at the end of the day, the company still earns revenue streams because they're able to use other sources like ads, as well as businesses buying ad space within those websites. So in this model, usually the services are pretty extensive and they're free, which is like a really good thing from the consumer perspective. And on the business side of things, they're also able to create large revenue streams because ads are a really big sort of, if Google is the number one platform, for example, for Google searching, then having people pay for being on the top of the Google search list is as like a pretty expensive thing. And therefore they can earn revenue through that sense as well as through ads as well. So this is also an interesting business model. And lastly, I think we have the online marketplace. So what this means is that different sellers can gather on the platform, sort of like the managed marketplace I was talking about earlier, and basically compete with each other to provide the same product or service. Amazon is a good example of this. If you go on Amazon, you can Google like iPhone cases, and there will be tons of different like providers or suppliers for that. And as a result of this, you can also rank it from like lowest to highest price or 5-star reviews in order to get the best product for the price. And the information transparency is also incredibly, it's very important for this one because you need to make sure that the reviews are correct and that people are not like trying to sell things that they are not, that's not pictured, and making sure that like the sellers of the information is actually trustworthy and reliable. But yeah, does anyone have any questions about these revenue models? Or if you have a startup, who you want to talk through sort of like a revenue model that you might be thinking of, feel free to jump in. I'm going to give it like 5 seconds. Okay, if not, I want to walk through a business model canvas that I've put together. So to briefly introduce this company is called Wagmo. It is I mean, you can read it here. It's sort of like a pet health insurance plan, and it provides sort of pet health insurance for sort of everyday care as well as emergency care. So we can go through this business model canvas very quickly and talk about what is on it. You guys can see this, right? Okay. So firstly, visions and values, which is sort of one of the key sort of things that people would read to get like a sense of what the company does and what their mission statement is, as well as their goals. So for this one, Wagmo's, they provide pet health insurance. Their client base mainly captures modern day pet parents who are busy with their everyday work and value efficiency and convenience. So they can take their pets to any vet, no network necessary, and after the visit, clients submit a photo of the bill via the app, and then they're reimbursed in 1 to 14 days via Venmo, PayPal, or bank transfer. So very basic insurance plan, sort of insurance business model, and you can really clearly see that from the vision and values. So the key activities that they do is also very straightforward: monthly fee service for either their pet wellness package or their pet insurance package. So for those of you who have a pet, you know that routine care is very expensive. So having insurance on your routine care can also very effectively sort of minimize the cost you're spending on your pet, as well as ensuring that they're healthy and still like well groomed, right? Okay. Value proposition. So what makes this sort of different than other insurance plans or pet health insurance plans in the industry? Essentially, they aim to sort of provide a wellness platform that covers routine care and emergency services. And I think that what they're targeting here is that currently in the status quo, emergency services are usually the only thing that's covered. Like usually you don't get insurance if you're going for a haircut, but with this plan, you now get insurance when you go for a haircut, and you don't have to pay for the haircut, which is a pretty good like value proposition, right? So yeah, they offer reimbursements for routine expenses like grooming, vaccines, blood work, fecal tests, urinalysis, dental care, other medications, and it also covers emergency vet visits, hospital stays, surgeries, X-rays, da da da. Okay, and then online portal and tech stack makes insurance claim streamlined, quick, and hassle-free. So those are the value propositions that they're bringing, and these are like sort of like the differentiating factors from other pet insurance platforms. So moving on to sort of like the customers of the platform. So since it's subscription based, they charge people monthly or annually depending on the plan. They also provide timely reimbursements, and therefore their sort of value proposition is that they're focused on customer relations, the speed of reimbursement, as well as the coverage breadth. So these are all things that are related to how the customer would experience Wagmo. And this is like what you should write in here. And alternatively, there's also enterprise clients. So Wagmo is also exploring a B2B option where sort of they are looking to integrate into insurance plans provided by companies themselves, so that because I mean you can read this here, but like basically it's a little bit more time and effort on Wagmo's part to acquire these enterprise clients. But what this means is that once they're on board, they can integrate into the HR systems of like these big companies and provide pet insurance for those who own pets within the company themselves, which is also pretty smart on their end, I think. But yeah, So who are the customers for the service? Basically, we have, pet owners in the US who are willing to pay a premium for their pet insurance. They see their pet as part of their family and loved ones. And also, because they're based in New York, New York has one of the highest pet insurance rates. So that's pretty smart of them to be targeting the specific customer segment here. Usually, they tend to be young, working professionals who want to save money on routine pet care, or they also want to like adopt new technologies and be like up with the trends, and having insurance for your pet seems to be very trendy right now, so that could also be a factor. And lastly, corporates who are looking to add cost-effective employee benefits, and these tend to be companies in the tech industry that are sort of focused on culture, health, and well-being, and these sort of companies are the ones who would be the most likely to onboard Wagmo as part of their HR system and insurance systems. Okay. Moving down, sorry, there's a lot of content here, a lot of words, but bear with me. So there are different channels for which they're targeting their customers. So for the direct-to-consumer part of things, pet owners usually discover through word of mouth from other pet owners, and customers also tend to do some sort of preliminary research to compare the different sort of insurance providers that they offer. And as a result, it's important for a company like this to increase their search engine optimization to make sure that they're at the top of the list when someone searches insurance, so that their customers can also, and also like to ensure that their customers can go to any different like service provider and still use the reimbursement function. So that's what they're focused on, is making sure that they can increase the spread of vets that they cover, as well as sort of their core offerings, and ensure that they are at the top of the list when they're searched for on Google. On the other hand, when you're looking on the B2B side of things, they're exploring partnerships with enterprise clients, alongside other corporate benefits. So even though this is still in like the early stages of this development, I think that they have received positive feedback so far, because sort of the whole idea is that after the pandemic, everyone now has an extra dog in their house. So they're going to be more likely to want to provide these cost-effective benefits for their employees. And it's an easy way for them to sort of increase their employee well-being, while at the same time sort of minimizing the costs they spend on their employees, but also maximizing the effectiveness of those different add-on features. So some of the key competitors in this space are sort of more larger insurance companies. So things like Lemonade, ASPCA, Nationwide, these are all sort of like major insurance players who are stepping into the industry, or large sort of pet players stepping into the insurance industry. And their main expertise in the space allows them to have cross-platform benefits with a wider geographical reach. However, a lot of the times, insurance is not the main driver of revenue for these companies. So there's less focus on their service offerings versus sort of Wagmo, who is very focused on the specific product, which means that it could potentially provide a better service. On the other hand, there are sort of like smaller scale pet insurance companies like Pumpkin, Many Pets, and these are all sort of smaller pet insurance companies that provide this insurance, but obviously with various geographies as well as varying degrees of coverage. And insurance plans tend to be more flexible depending on the needs of the pet. So these I feel like are the most similar to Wagmo, because they are also focused on sort of a very small siphon, or a very small geography, and they also tend to offer a more flexible plan that covers more things. So the number two small scale insurance companies are sort of the most akin to Wagmo's business model. Okay, moving on very quickly to this side of things. So obviously under their key partnerships, they have to have insurance, which is underwritten by another company. And one of the pros about having an insurance plan is that at Wagmo is that customers can go anywhere and with no restrictions, and that their services are accessible to any sort of like veterinarian out there. On the other hand, another way that they're sort of forming partnerships is through sort of offering Wagmo as a service perk to their employees, so through their B2B business model. So this could also bring in a lot of clients very quickly. Key resources, so insurance, they have to understand sort of how to market that effectively and how to make sure that people are still, paying that subscription fee every year to make sure their pets are getting the most out of it. So they really need to make sure that their website is up and running, that their customer service is really good, that they're able to leverage their expertise in pet care and industry to ensure that the demographic knowledge on who they're targeting is actually really good, and then execute with that. And last thing, because they don't have any brick and mortar stores, it makes the business more asset light and it's very scalable. And there's like essentially no limit to how many customers they can have because they're only a website and they can have as many people as they want, right? Okay. So last couple things, the cost structure is basically a fee paid to the insurance provider, and then everything else that's not paid to them is sort of the premium that they get, and that's what they can use for their profit. Obviously, they have their IT and app and web expense, as well as advertising expense. So in this, because I was writing it for another company, I wasn't actually sure what these costs actually are. But in the case of you guys, if you're starting a startup and you know sort of what your costs are, obviously this is the place where you would like write these numbers out. Potentially also you could like include some projections on how these costs would change in the future, as well as how they might like increase when you're acquiring more customers. So a lot of these things, a lot of these key performance indicators, you'd also want to include in the cost structure. It's just a very simplistic way to represent it. And then revenue streams. So this I could talk a little bit more about because this is on their website. But essentially, basically, they have two revenue streams, the pet insurance plan as well as the wellness plan. And it starts at $20 a month for the wellness, and pet insurance starts at $13 a month. And also depends on the existing conditions that your pet has. So if your pet has like, a lot of chronic illnesses, the insurance plan might be a little bit more because they expect them to sort of go to more visits to the vet, for example, and thus there's a higher likelihood that you're going to use the reimbursements more. But yeah, so these are different sort of options that are provided on the website. There's a 20K max annual coverage with a max of 10K per incident. There's a reimbursement of either 90 or 100%, as well as deductibles, which are paid upfront in order to ensure that you have some sort of like skin in the game with insurance companies. But yeah, this is basically a very, very quick run through of the Wagmo business model. And you can see that after going through it, you sort of get you get a sense of like what the entire business does, and all the way from their customers, their competitors, to their resources and cost structure and revenue streams. So essentially the value of a business model canvas is that it allows you to understand a business from all their different aspects on a single page, which is also pretty important because you want to be succinct, which I wasn't really here, but essentially you really want to make sure that you're writing what your business does and all of its different aspects and different sort of resources, stakeholders, competitors into one sort of very succinct sort of page, and also how through the customer discovery process, you're crossing things out and you are like sort of changing what your assumptions once were in order to improve your awareness and understanding of your own business. So does anyone have any questions about Wagmo specifically? If not, I can also go into another business model canvas, which is also pretty interesting. Any questions?
Theo, I think there's a question in the chat. We can read it out loud if you'd like. Okay, so someone asked, should the business model look the same for a nonprofit organization?
I guess it depends on what the nonprofit does. So for example, a nonprofit would probably have less revenue streams since it's nonprofit, or there might be revenue streams, but they're being donated to something else for a cause or in something in that nature. So in this sense, you could still include the revenue stream section, but you might want to clarify that it's sort of it's like sort of the revenue streams are more on the sort of what I'm trying to say is if it's a nonprofit, you might have revenue streams, but the revenue streams you should clarify are not actually revenue. They're more like revenue streams that are converted into donations or donated to this organization for a good cause, if that makes sense. But yes, and I think in many ways the layout should be the same. You should still have your key competitors, your different channels for how you're targeting those customers, your resources, your partnerships. I guess in that sense, your key activities may be less business oriented, but they can still be sort of, you can still talk about like what things that your organization does to help us get a better picture of what the, I guess, what the nonprofit does, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for the question just asked about the sharing the business model canvas, we're going to, after we receive your application, and then we'll get back to your result, and then before round one, we'll share the same one for the CVC module before the competition starts. So we'll share the same one, and then to every teams who got advanced to round one. So don't worry about that. And Phil, if you're willing to share yours, you're also welcome to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I made this business model canvas like for a class, and it's like not really like proprietary information. Like all this information can be found online, but also this isn't like the, I guess, sample business model, or this isn't like the ideal that you guys should strive for, because obviously like I don't know any of the cost structures here, and there's a couple other things that I'm not too sure about either, such as the key resources. Like this is me interpreting what I think their business is, but obviously on the other hand, if I were to make a business by myself, like I would be able to fill this out in a lot more detail. So this is sort of not the level of detail that we would want, I think, because like a lot of the stuff is like, oh, like advertising, yeah, but how much is advertising, or what exactly is the advertising that you're like purchasing or like paying for or like subscribing to? Like, are you using Facebook, Instagram, or like TikTok? Like, you know what I mean? So a lot of these things I haven't actually built into this business model canvas yet, because it was just me like doing this and for practice and like looking at another company and trying to dissect its core business components. But on the other hand, if you were doing this, like I know I'm gonna invest in advertising specifically in TikTok, and that's something I can write, and how much it costs, and like what I think it's gonna cost in the future. So that's sort of the detail that we want. Whereas this is a very high level overview of like the what should go in each of the different segments, if that makes sense. Okay, any more questions? If not, I'm gonna keep going. Nice. Okay, so this is another business model canvas that I put together really quickly. So this is Minded. It's essentially a mental health startup. It's a real startup in their Series A funding. Excuse me. And basically, it's about helping people with sort of mental health issues, helping people with mental illnesses regarding their prescriptions, and getting those prescriptions sort of like delivered to your doorstep directly from the psychiatrist. So if you want to take a look at it, we can go through it together. This is a little bit more detailed in a sense. But as always, we just start off with their visions and values. So, you know, people wait an average of 11 years to seek mental health treatment, and once they see a doctor, they often feel judged. Minded wants to change this. They want to skip the doctor's office and immediately get the medication for anxiety, depression, insomnia, etc. from home. So basically, it's supposed to help people who are tired of making routine trips to a psychiatrist, and obviously they sort of want to make sure that the medication is right. So what they do is that they start off with an initial online assessment or in a chat with a psychiatrist or practitioner to determine which medication is appropriate. They only provide plans for anxiety, depression, and insomnia. So no sort of like medications surrounding ADHD or other drugs like that. And then after it's prescribed, the Minded will deliver it directly to the patient or send it to the pharmacy nearby if that's what they want. And it's currently available in these countries. They also don't offer like therapy or like in-person services or medication disposal. And these are sort of the highlighted ones are things that we added in the future after doing a little bit more research and speaking to some customers. So this is also like an interesting feature that we want to see in your business model canvases as well. Is like how your thinking has changed or progressed after conducting more customer discovery and doing more research online as well. So what is Minded Values Proposition? Basically, it's a telehealth platform that streamlines the process of mental health prescription drug fulfillment. It facilitates renewals and refills for anxiety and depression medication and enables them to be delivered to the doorstep, enabling patients to get relief from scheduling and shelving as well as running out of medicine. So basically, it means you will not run out of medicine with the service because they'll ship it directly to your doorstep. Allows for virtual telehealth appointments with psychiatrists and nurse practitioners. It's easy to ask questions and makes mental health sort of easy and straightforward. And it's their goal to destigmatize mental health medication and encourage people who are suffering from mental disorders to seek help from professionals. Pretty easy, straightforward business model. Let's look at the customers. So it's available for people 18 plus, and they treat a whole spectrum of mental health conditions and prescribe a wide range of medications as well. But they do have prohibited drugs such as Adderall, as well as other sort of like drugs that other like performance enhancing drugs. And also you have to sort of be evaluated by a psychiatrist in order to receive medication, or you can have proof of prior medication through their state prescription monitoring program. So obviously it's not a great fit for people who have who need a high level of care. So if they're like in a crisis, actively suicidal, or need to be hospitalized, like obviously these are not customers that Minded is targeting. They're more targeting sort of people who have like mild depression or anxiety and need sort of a easier way to fill their medication, or they might be extra forgetful. So having this delivered right to their doorstep could also be a really value add feature for them. So yes, customer segments: people who currently don't have easy access to mental health services or don't trust their current offerings, people in these states specifically. And also interesting, 80% of customers are women, typically in their early 30s or college educated. So they're clearly appealing to a younger demographic who are sort of early adopters or first movers in the space, who are comfortable with receiving telehealth medication, telehealth telehealth assessments, as well as getting their medication shipped to them directly through this new platform, right? So this obviously makes sense because I feel like people who are younger tend to more easily adopt technology, and oftentimes like having these sort of demographic descriptors in your customer segment is also very helpful because it gives you a little bit more detail as to like who exactly this person is, and what they might be interested in, things like that. Okay, so their key channels include sort of this medication pharma delivery service called Medley. They also have psychiatrists who interact with the patient virtually through the app. They manage sort of mental health conditions, as well as you get unlimited messages with nurses, and monthly meetings with a psychiatrist. And obviously, they send medication to your local pharmacy. So the top competitors include these sort of companies: Nurx, Muro Health, Mentor Health, but what they're uniquely what Minded is unique in that it offers psychiatric help rather than psychological. So basically, it means that they're not trying to like give you therapy. They're trying to diagnose you with the disorder and then give you the prescription drugs necessary, right? So obviously they could expand their offering to include things like therapy, like BetterHelp, but obviously their offerings are sort of focused on prescription delivery drugs, which is very different. So you can see I wrote like a little blurb about what the other companies were here, but obviously if you were to go about this, you should do it in a little bit more detail. Nurx is a digital healthcare company offering 10 services according to reproductive health, at-home testing, dermatology, migraine care, etc. Muro Health, online mental health care company that teaches people the skills needed to create long-lasting healthy lifestyle habits. And Mentor Health is a digital mental health care company designed for all university students. So out of these competitors, Mentor Health is the closest to Minded in that sense, but it's still very different because Mantra is targeting specifically university students, whereas Minded is targeting sort of like women in their 30s and college educated. So a little bit older of a demographic, but still sort of like the same type of people who care about their mental health, who care about, making sure that they are taking their prescriptions and medications on time. But yeah, this is like from a quick Google search. So definitely would recommend going to a little bit more detail about why you're different from all of these different competitors and how your product or service offering is better or you're targeting a different people compared to these. And I can later on show you guys a resource to use if you are interested about the competitors and like to get a sense of like what the landscape is in specific industries. But yeah, so for this Minded, they have their key resources, their medical professionals, their system to deliver prescription medication, including logistical software, supplier delivery information. They also need obviously a tech stack in order to sort of verify and cross-reference patients' prescription history, as well as a telehealth platform, something like Zoom for video conferencing and Q&A with the different sort of folks involved in the psychiatric process. Their partnerships mainly involve medication suppliers, as well as the way in which they deliver the medications. These are sort of suggestions. So I was like, oh, they should establish a pipeline to recruit professionals to expand their team so that they can provide their services to more people. Since it's app-based, they must ensure that they have engineering talent in order to build the app and to maintain it, and also to ensure good customer support. And also sort of exploring partnerships to tap into other sort of like medications like genetic testing or psychedelics for treatment-resistant depression. So other forms of treating the same illnesses that they currently cover. Okay, so this is another way that you can split up cost structure. So you have sort of the fixed costs, variable costs, other costs, and this is just a more clear way of saying like, oh, here are things that might change according to the number of customers that I have, which are variable costs. Fixed costs are like, you have to pay that regardless of how many customers you have. And then other costs are sort of like, sort of miscellaneous, like marketing, taxes, social media, things like that. So wages, obviously, you have to pay your employees, your tech team, medical team, psychiatrists, customer support, your web dev and maintenance costs, office space, business license, onboarding and training employees. Like these are all sort of fixed costs, and you do them like usually once or twice. And sort of the wages are also sort of like you have to pay the wages regardless of whether you get customers or not. Whereas the variable costs on the other hand are like sort of things that increase per customer. So costs of prescription medication, as well as payment processing and shipping and delivery fees are all sort of like, for example, the more customers you have, the more things you have to ship to them. Therefore, shipping and delivery fees will go up, payment processing will go up, as well as the cost of prescription medication goes up. And yeah, so obviously, if I had more time, I would have included the exact numbers here, but because I don't work for Minded and I don't know that their business costs, so I can't really say that like definitively. But in your guys' case, should definitely include the costs for each of these, and also just like how you project them to increase or decrease in the future, and how, like, for example, how variable costs, like how much each additional customer would add to the variable cost, if that makes sense. So on the membership side of things, it's $65 a month, plus the cost of medication, which could be reimbursable through your insurance plan if it's in the coverage range, as well as a $25 a month membership for the first month. So basically it's also important to know that they're like not sometimes eligible for Medicare or Medicaid or other health insurance platforms. So customers might have to cover these costs themselves, and just to make sure that that's something that the customers know about beforehand. But on the other hand, shipping is free, which is pretty good. But the cost of medication itself comes out to around $8 per medication per month. So yeah, that's basically the business plan, can be reimbursable through certain insurance plans. But if anyone has any questions about this business model canvas, happy to try to answer them. But I think from this one of the main takeaways is sort of like you should try to change your business model canvas depending on what customer discovery you do. So you can see that here, like there's a couple like highlighted things and things that are crossed out. So these are things that we have like iterated on and sort of like seen has like, or connected new research and new discoveries that would change sort of how we perceive the company. But overall, through going through this canvas in like 10 minutes, you can really quickly understand all there is to know about the business, as well as like what they do and what problem they're trying to solve, competitors, costs, revenues. So everything about the business basically is in one page. Any questions? Okay, that is actually all that I had for today. unless you guys want to go through another business model canvas, which I mean we could, but I feel like it might get a little repetitive there. But yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for coming. Please stay behind if you have any questions. Happy to answer anything if it's about like your business model canvas that you're currently thinking about, or if you are not sure, like if you have specific questions about your specific startup that you might want to ask us questions about, happy to stick around and answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks guys for coming. We just want to reiterate the importance of the business model canvas, because as we said in an earlier email, we will be grading these ourselves and it will count for 10% of your score. Another important note is we will be looking at it throughout the course of the competition. So if you do progress to future rounds, we will be looking at how you iterate and how you change your business model canvas with regards to the different the customer discovery you've done and the other things that you've been able to learn from research and like interviewing possible customers.
Yeah, and here's an example one we will show you guys. This is the one we show to our participants in our info session if you came. And here, if you can see, is that like the black one is the original one, and those are ones that you should submit like for your round one. But if you by any chance you get advanced to round two, we're expecting you to like submit the one with like, you can see that the blue font for the value proposition. The blue font is the one, the blue text there, the one that you wrote down for the round one application, and then the green one will be the new one, and the red one will be the one that you cross out. So we're gonna be here to check your growth throughout the time and how you pivot your ideas and how you discover all these changing stuff because your customer discovery surveys and things like that. So it's really important to keep track of that. And yeah, we just want you to be aware of that, because the growth is one thing that we really value as the CVC competition.
Yeah, I think that's it. Well, if you apply to be part of CVC, we'll be sending you more detailed emails with the things that we're expecting, as well as logistics, like what round you'll be pitching for, or like what times your pitch session will be next weekend.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.